I'm Scott Malevsky, and this is Interviews with Me.
Oh, Maine, your rivers, your back roads claim me.
This week, Maeghan Maloney.
Don't hide your light under a bushel. Let it shine. We all have things we need to share with the world and that we need to share with the community. And we're all here for a reason. Every single one of us.
Because everyone has a story.
Welcome home to Maine.
My next guest was raised in Freiburg, and Lewiston, and Turner. How's that? She attended Swarthmore. I'm going to get that wrong. I went through this with Scott Cowger, too, because she went to Swarthmore.
That's right.
She attended Swarthmore College in Pennsylvania, continuing on to Harvard Law. After working in Portland, Oregon, and then Asia for a year, she returned home to Maine. She worked as the assistant district attorney before winning a seat in the Maine House of Representatives in 2010. She currently serves as the district attorney for Kennebec and Somerset counties. You literally have like the best smile of anybody I know. Please welcome Maeghan Maloney.
Thanks so much. This is a lot of fun.
Well, I hope you have as much fun as I do doing these. So first of all, we've already been talking about this. You grew up in Freiburg.
Yes.
Okay. And then you moved to Lewiston and then Turner.
And of course, it depends on what you mean by the term grew up.
Grew up, exactly.
Every place definitely shapes you and has an impact on you. But Freiburg was definitely the time of my childhood that I enjoyed the most.
Okay.
I was very, very happy in Freiburg.
Yep.
My mom took care of all of my friends after school. She was the after school program.
Yep.
Our house was walking distance from the school. So we'd all walk home together. And
so you were the gathering place after school.
It really was.
That's awesome.
And I absolutely loved my time there. But like many people experienced in the 80s, my dad was laid off from his job. Yep. He was a social worker at Bridgeton Hospital. When that happened, he could not find another job in the area. My mom found a job in Lewiston, and that's how we ended up moving up towards Lewiston.
Yep.
But for a year, we were separated. My dad and my sister stayed in Freiburg, fixing up the house, trying to get it to sell. My mom and I moved to Lewiston, and we lived with a woman who had never been married, Esther Gagnon, and she played the organ for Holy Cross Church, and she allowed us to live in her house. Yes, but I loved Freiburg. Those were definitely my best childhood memories come from Freiburg.
So Freiburg Fair, is it all it's cracked up to be?
It absolutely is.
You caught the pig.
I caught the pig and the pig scramble.
So what do you win for that?
Well, so you get to keep the pig if you want, but my parents didn't allow it. I
was going to say.
So I sold the pig. I think I got $20 or $25 for it. It wasn't a fortune, but at the time I got to keep the money, and of course I spent it all at the fair.
Well, yeah, of course. That's great. Tell me about your mother. What was your mother like?
Oh, just absolutely wonderful.
So first of all, your parents still alive?
They are. I'm very fortunate. Both my parents are still alive. They're still married. They've been married for over 50 years.
Wow.
And they've just been tremendous role models for me with resilience. Yep. They both have a tremendous amount of resilience. They've had a lot of hardships in their lives, but they have shown me how you keep going when you have hardship. My mom's from Northern Maine. She's from Van Buren. Her dad had a potato farm. Initially, she had a potato farm and she worked on the farm. And then he sold the farm to get the money to start a cedar mill. One of his big claims to fame is that he once sold cedar shingles to John F. Kennedy.
Wow. Okay.
Yeah. And awesome. Actually, when I was in the legislature, I did a potato tour where a number of legislators went up to Northern Maine together. And I was standing on a farm as part of this tour. And I told the farmer, well, my grandfather used to own a farm here. And he said, is that right? And I could tell he wasn't quite sure he believed me or not. And I said, yes, he did. And he says, well, what was his name? And I said, Rudolph Blier. And he said, well, I'll be. This was his farm.
Wow.
So that was really special for me to see that the land is still being used to grow potatoes
today. As a potato
today.
farm.
Yeah.
What do you remember the most about your mom?
My mom loved to read books to me. She loved to sing to me while she did my hair. I mean, those two things really stand out. She just, I love to have her braid my hair because she would sing the whole time. She read to me all the time, chapter books, Little Princess, Secret Garden. She just loved to read, and I loved to sit next to her in the big comfy chair and have her read me stories.
Probably didn't matter the book, did it?
No, not really, but she did. She always picked books where she knew that there would be a female character that I would enjoy and really hold on to the story. Nice. So yeah, she picked.
What about your dad?
Well, my dad is the most personable human being on the planet, I think. My mom is actually quite shy when she's with people she doesn't know and when she's with a crowd. But my dad, the entire world is his best friend. Like, he just has, you can't go to a grocery store with my dad without him talking to the shop clerks and him talking with just everyone, because the way that he views the world is that everyone has a lot that they have to deal with in their life. And so if he can say something nice to make someone's day a little bit better, he is always trying to do that. He's a very, very outgoing. It's funny, he never ran for political office. He never did anything like that, which I think he would have been extremely good at because he just naturally loves people. But he definitely showed me that people are wonderful, and engaging with people is just such a fun thing to do. And he absolutely always loved it.
Now I got to meet your dad.
Yeah, I know.
I totally think I would hit it off with your dad.
The first time I ran for office, he stood at the Augusta Armory and shook hands for me.
Oh, he did?
Yes, he did. And I received emails from people saying, I haven't met you. I wanted you to know that I voted for you because you have such a great dad that you must be an okay person.
That is That's a great compliment right there.
Yeah, no, he really is. He's you like him the minute you meet him.
Wow, that's awesome. So what was your childhood like? I mean, you moved around a little bit.
Yeah.
Tell me more about your childhood.
So, I mean, as I said, in the years in Freiburg were full of stability until my dad lost his job. That was a really difficult period because we had to be separated as a family for a year.
Yeah, that's hard.
And it really was. I mean, we didn't have a place to live in Lewiston, which is where my mom had gotten a job. Right. And commuting from Freiburg to Lewiston was too far. Until we could sell the house in Freiburg, there was no ability to get a place in Lewiston.
And I'm sure at that point, there was not too many people buying houses in Freiburg.
There weren't. And the market had gone down. And so
this was like the early 80s, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
yes.
High interest rates.
Yep.
Yeah.
And we just weren't able to sell the house. And eventually, when they did sell it, they didn't make any money from the sale. They lost money when you consider that my dad put an entire year into painting the house and fixing up every single room and just trying to get it to look as perfect as possible so that somebody would buy it. So that was a very, very rough time. My sister was 3 years old. For her to have my mom take me to Lewiston with her. Right. And for my sister to just...
so you were separate.
We were completely...
It wasn't just your dad and you girls with your mom. It was
our whole family was separated.
Wow.
I mean, we'd get together on the weekend. But during the week, it was really rough. And I remember thinking it felt like I didn't see my sister and my dad anymore. I know we got together on the weekend, but in my mind, it was just this completely... Well, I don't think I really understood how to process it at the time. It became more, instead of sort of feeling every day, I think I shut down my emotions and just got through every day. But I never will forget Esther Gagnon and how extremely kind she was.
What a gift.
That, she always wanted to be a nun. She wasn't able to be because she had a club foot. At the time, she was, I know it's like people don't know this,
but
that
keeps someone from being a nun.
It did, because you actually, they had so many people who wanted to go into the convent at the time. that if you had a health concern like that, it could keep you from being accepted. So what she did instead is she bought a small home in Lewiston across from Holy Cross Church, and she played the organ for the church and lived on her own her whole life. And was very active in the church.
Essentially was a nun without becoming a nun.
Yes. And I have two great aunts who were both Good Shepherd sisters. And so they knew Esther through their ministry, and they asked her if she would be willing to take in my mom and I. Wow. And she did. She was amazing. And she would play pinochle with me. She's just a very sweet person. She would make cookies and pretend not to notice how many I ate. So I would always eat way too many.
I don't know anybody who knows how to play pinochle. So, that's... Now, is she still alive?
No, she is not. No, she passed. When I lived with her, she was in her 80s already. Wow. And I was in 4th grade. Yeah,
sounds like she was a pretty special lady.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, very much so.
Yeah, so childhood was kind of a blur, it sounds like.
Well, and then after that year, we were on the waiting list for a year to move into Tall Pines, the low-income housing project in Lewiston. So at the end of that year, we got a place in Tall Pines. They sold the house for probably less than they should have, but they just needed to
cut loose,
be able to move on. Yeah. And so that's when my dad and my sister came and joined my mom and I in Lewiston. Tall Pines was great because the amount that you paid for rent was based on your income. So it was a sliding scale. So as they made more, we paid more, but they didn't sort of have a drop deadline when they kicked you out. So we moved in when I was in 5th grade, and we moved out halfway through 8th grade. That's how I think about it, because the years of my childhood. And at that point, both of my parents had jobs as child protective social workers. Oh, wow. And the amount that we were paying in rent to live there was more than we would have paid on a mortgage. So that's when they finally realized, it's time to find a home. Yep. And they looked in Lewiston and Turner and Auburn. And there was a program available to help you if you didn't have the money for a down payment. Yep. So they used that program, and they got a home in Turner. And that worked out very well. It's the only home my brother ever really knew. My brother's 12 years younger than me. So he always...
So you actually have 3 siblings.
Yeah, I have 2 siblings. Wow. Yeah. But so I went to Leavitt High School in Turner, and my sister started off there and graduated also from Leavitt. My brother only went to schools in Turner. So it's just funny, our different lives. I mean, he's known a tremendous amount of stability in his life. Jared Golden was a friend of his at Leavitt. Yeah.
Oh, that's funny.
He's
so it's almost like a completely separate family history for your brother.
Yes, it is.
Wow.
Yeah. No, and I remember my brother would get all of the sports shirts that he wanted, even though they were about $40 each. And when I was in high school, all of my clothes were hand-me-downs from my cousin. So, and I remember going back home to visit and seeing my brother with all of these shirts and being like,
"Where's my shirt?"
I never got anything new at his age. How was he have? But he's a tremendous, tremendous, wonderful person. I love my brother enormously. There was just that little jealousy, and when I go back,
I totally understand that.
Yeah, and both my parents retired from the state as. Well, my mom as a child protective social worker, but my dad went from child protective to adult mental health.
Wow. That's quite a switch.
Yeah, he really enjoyed adult mental health. I actually asked him recently if he could do his career over again, what he would do differently. Yep. And he said he would start with adult mental health because he felt like his whole purpose was helping people. Right. It was helping people with disabilities and helping people who were elderly to make sure that they got the services that they needed and coordinating all those services and just making sure everybody had what they needed. Yeah. And that works so perfectly with his personality because he loves to care. But whereas child protective, because he often had to deliver bad news, he went into it because he cares so much about children, there's so much in that job that was just very emotionally difficult for him.
Gosh, I bet.
Yeah.
That's a hard job.
Very, very hard. 'Cause there are times when you have to take children away from their families. There's no child, and this is something my parents always told me, there's no child, no matter how abusive the situation, who ever wants to be removed from their family. So that's extremely
mom is mom, no
difficult.
matter what happens.
Yeah,
Same-
extremely difficult. So-
You know, I've thought at times, being a computer geek, that I'd love to go work for the Maine Computer Crimes Task Force.
Oh, yes.
But I think
what you have
just
to look
because
at,
of all
though.
the children-related
Yeah.
stuff, I don't think I'd be able to do it.
When I have child pornography cases, I get the report from the Computer Crimes Task Force on what the images are. And what I say to the defense attorney is, if I have to actually look at this image, then the offer's going to change.
Oh, yeah.
If your client wants to plead guilty before I have to look,
Yeah.
then that's one offer.
Yeah.
Because they're searing. They sear themselves
Oh, yeah.
into your brain, and they're absolutely horrific.
Well, it's like I tell my kids, you can't unsee something.
You can't.
It just
Yep.
it doesn't work that way.
Yep.
Boy, your dad, and there's such a need for adult mental health these days, too.
Yes.
It seems like there's
Yeah.
even more of a need now than there used to be. So.
Well, when my parents retired, they both became full-time caregivers for their grandchildren. So
Okay.
they're still working. They still
Probably harder than they
yes,
were before.
they do. My sister and her husband are both doctors, and they work in fields where they work 60 hours a week, and they used to work more like 80 to 100 hours
Sure.
a week. So when my sister's first child was born, my parents went to visit her. My sister was interviewing nannies
Yep.
to take care of her child. And my mom said, absolutely not. My grandchild is not going to be raised by a stranger. And my parents moved in, and they have been taking
Wow.
care of their grandchildren ever
That's great.
since. And my sister has 3 children, and her youngest is 2 years old. So there's still a lot to be done.
They're chasing.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say you're pretty close with your family now.
Oh, very close. Yeah.
Just based on
Yeah.
the dynamics of the relationship growing
Yeah.
up.
Oh, very close. Yeah. We all just went to Ireland together, actually.
did?
Yeah. Just my parents, my sister, my brother, and me. Just the
Wow.
5 of us.
Now, do you have any Irish heritage in
My dad is Irish.
Oh, okay.
But he had never been to Ireland. So this was one of his
pilgrimage.
Yes, it really was. And it was on his bucket list.
Right.
My brother planned the entire trip all around my dad's heritage.
And your dad knows everybody in the country now, right?
Well, pretty much. I mean, it did feel that way. It felt like the whole time we were there, people were constantly just welcoming us home. And the very special thing that my brother set up is when we were having lunch one day, a woman showed up by the name of Lorna Maloney, who's a genealogist. And she said to my dad, I can trace your history back to where we're connected, we're long lost relatives. She's going to give him a whole genealogical printout and actually apply for Irish citizenship for him. Yeah.
Wow.
So he can be a
Oh my
dual
gosh.
citizen. It was really sweet. It was
Sounds
really
like a
nice.
fantastic trip.
Really nice of my brother to do that for my dad. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer 2 years ago, went through surgery, and it was extremely difficult to recover from afterwards. Right. He had a feeding tube for a very long time. So now that he is healthy enough to move and to eat and to
travel.
And to travel, that's exactly what we said. We're like, okay, we're doing this now, and we're all going together. There's no other time for you to go back, because he'd never been to Ireland, even though he has such a close family history. Yeah.
And now he's got a whole history to catch up on.
Yeah. It was very
so
special.
How would you describe a perfect day growing up as a child? Sounds like there weren't a ton of them, but...
Well, there were. I mean, in Freiburg, I really felt like I had many perfect days.
Yep.
I mean, I would wake up, and my mom always did my hair in the morning. And so she'd always sing to me in the morning, and she always made breakfast. I went to the snow school. I could walk there. I'd see my friends. I often bumped into Jennifer and Stephanie Hicks on the walk over because they would also walk to school. I remember Meredith Baker and Darcy. And I mean, all these kids, like, you
remember.
I do remember them. They were wonderful. We just would have so much fun together. And then they'd all come to my house afterwards. And the first thing I would do is I would just kind of throw my backpack down and run out to the yard and go on what I called my space trolley, which is this thing that my dad hooked up between two trees. It's like a piece of wood on wires, and you can glide from one tree to the other. It was my favorite thing in the world.
Your own zip line.
Yes, that's exactly what it is. It's like a zip line, except not as high.
Well, and yours was a space trolley. So
yes, exactly.
Absolutely. Hey, that's great. What was the worst thing you did growing up?
The worst thing I did growing up.
I know we're limited because you are district attorney, but you can't get into too many details.
I mean, the truth is, when I was in high school, it was during the hearings with, who was it that was nominated to the Supreme Court, and he didn't get it because of smoking marijuana. I can't think of his name right now, but I remember hearing all of that and thinking, well, that's it. I'm never going to smoke marijuana. I mean,
Wow.
it had this huge impact on me because I just thought, well, it's not worth it. I always knew that if I wanted to go to college, I needed to work very hard in high school.
Yep.
That my parents weren't going to be able to just pay for college. Right. And if I was going to work that hard, I didn't want something as silly as
smoking a joint,
right? To mess it up for me. So I really never did. And I remember I went back for a high school reunion, and we went to someone's home who I'd gone to high school with, and everyone was sitting around and reminiscing about the parties that they had at the house. And someone at one point said, "Oh, you remember Megan? Remember when we all like jumped in the swimming pool?" And I said, "Nope, nope." And they were like, "What?" I said, "Yeah, no, you never invited me." And they said, "Oh, that's right. Yeah, we wouldn't have."
You were straight-laced. Yeah.
And it was just so funny. Like, everyone just went like, "Oh, yeah, no, we would not invite you. No." Like, there's like no apology. Like, no, like, it's just like, yeah, no, why would we want to? So I was pretty boring in high school. I had friends, but they just weren't, I wasn't one who you'd want at a party. I was far too boring.
But you it sounds like you knew what you wanted as far as, I don't know if even then you knew you wanted to be a lawyer.
Yeah, I did.
You did. So you're one of those few people who, you know what, this is what I'm going to do. But you knew what you wanted. You had a plan. You stuck to it.
Yeah.
So it's safe to say you were a good student in high school.
You studied hard. Yeah. Yeah. I was valedictorian. I was president of my class.
See, that doesn't surprise me.
Yeah. And I got a lot of joy from doing car washes and raising money for project graduation. And I've always loved people and working with people, but I was very, very worried, I guess, about messing up. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I still can't think what the worst thing I did.
It's okay. Some people just say, "Yeah, I'm not going to tell you that."
Oh. Well,
I've had a couple people tell me that. So.
If I think of something later, I'll...
How has your life been different than you imagined it would be when you were a kid?
Honestly, I really was not one of those kids who imagined getting married. I really didn't think. I don't know why, really, because, my parents were very happily married and they're still married, but it didn't occur to me that I would. I met my husband in college. I got married when I was 22 years old, and it has been the most miraculous part of my life. I just can't believe how much I really enjoy, and I still just really enjoy being married to Christopher. And that does surprise me. Like, it still surprises me. It still surprises me just how excited I am to see him at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like, I'm sort of like, wow, how can I still feel like, I mean, it's been over 25 years, but I'm still just...
But that's nice, though. I mean, it's funny. I had a hint of that growing up as well. I saw what my parents had, and I remember thinking as a kid, I don't know if I'm going to find anybody like that I'm going to feel that way about. And thankfully I have. So it's very similar to what you're talking about.
Yeah, yeah.
And Chris is such a nice guy.
He really is. He really is.
I mean, he's just the most mellow, down-to-earth guy. He's just laid back, and everything's great. And he's such a nice guy.
Yeah, yeah. No, he really is. So yeah, that's been the biggest surprise.
What is your favorite family tradition that you've passed down?
Oh my goodness. We say a prayer every single night all together. It's a little funny for like my kids' friends when they come over and spend the night because we all put our arms around each other and we all say the prayer of Jabez together, and then we tell each other that we love each other. Yep.
That's the one. Bless me, Lord.
Yes. I think it's a little bit embarrassing almost for people who aren't used to that because it's a very emotional time.
Sure.
But it's very important to us that we tell each other every single night that we love each other and that we have a physical connection every night so that we all put our arms around each other.
Yeah.
So that's my favorite family tradition.
That's great.
I love it.
Okay, so I'm going to transition out of grade school and high school. You graduate high school, you're valedictorian. Was Swarthmore your first choice?
It actually was. And it's because Susan Ruff won the statewide math competition my junior year in high school when she was a senior. I might have been a sophomore and she was a senior. I was so impressed by her. And I was so impressed that this woman had won the statewide math competition. I was usually won by men or girls, boys, since we're in high school. And then I heard that she was going to Swarthmore College. So I actually got up my courage and asked her if I could visit her at Swarthmore. She said I could. So it was my junior year. I got on a train in Boston. My dad brought me to Boston.
Now, was this your first time outside the state?
No. I actually went to Russia with Betsy Sweet.
Oh,
someone who you could interview who's fascinating. She got a group of high school students together and brought us to Russia in the name of Samantha Smith. And
I was going to ask.
Yes,
that was about the right time. Yeah,
it was. Yeah, I had traveled a lot.
You'd already traveled the world.
Oh, yes.
That's awesome.
So, which I think is partly why my parents thought I could handle this. So they put me on a train in Boston, and I rode the train all the way to Philadelphia, switched trains, and took the train to Swarthmore College.
And how old were you?
This must have been my junior year of high school because I hadn't finished applying yet to colleges. I met Susan and I slept on the floor of her dorm room, went to classes and spent a week there. I just loved it. I just thought this is the most amazing place in the world. It was that everyone cared so much about learning and they were so excited to learn that even during lunch, there were people talking about economics. Like I remember sitting down at lunch and students talking about what was the best economic structure and how choices that government makes influences the choices of individuals. And I was fascinated. I just loved it. So I applied to Swarthmore, applied to other schools as well, including University of Maine. And when I got the acceptances, University of Maine would have cost my parents $8,000 a year. And Swarthmore gave me what was called a McCabe scholarship, which gave me free college education for all 4 years.
Wow.
With no loans.
Oh, wow.
Yes. I mean,
obviously you have to keep your grades up, but yeah.
Well, they actually put no requirements on it.
Wow.
But I did keep my grades up.
Yeah. I was going to say, I couldn't imagine you not keeping your grades up.
Yeah. No, I did. I've always loved learning. Yep. I just really, really love learning. That was a great place for me to be because I was surrounded by people who constantly wanted to talk about ideas and constantly wanted to learn.
So Swarthmore was a great experience for you.
Yes.
Did you use it as a chance to kind of explore the surrounding Pennsylvania?
I did.
I mean, you're not far from New York at that point either. So
true,
did you go into New York that often?
Not New York, but I went into Philadelphia a lot.
Yeah.
So Philadelphia was a 20-minute train ride away.
Exactly.
And I did investigate Philadelphia, and I took an internship with Families of Murdered Children, which was housed in the Philadelphia District Attorney's Office in the Homicide Division. They allowed me to work with families and accompany them to court for the trials of the person who had murdered their child. I found that absolutely fascinating.
That's pretty rough stuff for a college student. I mean, how did that affect you?
I found it very interesting. The way that the law was applied, the courtroom, I found that I really wanted to be in the courtroom all the time. So the lawyers' arguments, whether it was motions where they were arguing over what would be suppressed and what would be allowed in the trial, to whether it was the trial itself. Like, I found every piece of it fascinating. To me, I think because my parents are social workers, I've always known that there are horrific things happening in the world. And so if I'm not engaging and a part of trying to make it better, it doesn't feel real to me. Right. It feels like I'm sort of living in this artificial world.
Detached.
And I just never wanted to live in an artificial world. I've always wanted to live where people are going through a lot and to try to help the people who are going through that. So I really enjoyed working with the families and answering their questions and just listening to the person that they had, listening to them talk about the person they had lost and just helping them process that. I found that in a strange way, it helped me because I just felt more connected to people. And while I was there, I wrote a pamphlet on the criminal justice process in Philadelphia and what it's like to be a victim going through this process and the different stages, what you can expect. That way they were able to give that to the families of victims so that they kind of have a roadmap of what to expect going through the process. So I got a lot out of that experience, and it's convinced me I wanted to be in a district attorney's office.
It was almost like on-the-job training for kind of psychology, but also trial law.
Right.
I mean, you got to witness all these different cases going on.
Right, exactly.
Wow.
And that's just something that I naturally felt drawn to, having grown up hearing about my parents' cases. They talked about their work all the time. They couldn't use names, and they had to keep things confidential.
They're not necessarily going to shelter you either. I mean,
no, they didn't. And so I heard about horrific stories all throughout my childhood, and it was always my parents trying to make it better. So I wanted to do something similar. What
stands out to you the most about your time at Swarthmore?
Well, definitely meeting Christopher.
Yeah. Well, yes. Okay. We'll give Christopher a little bit of benefit there.
I met him in the library, and we talked for 3 hours. A week later, we were dating. I mean, It was nothing else can quite compare with that. Overall, it was how the school encouraged me to think for myself and to be the best person I can be. I just felt like the professors actually cared about the students. It's a small school. Yeah. So I felt like, the administration knew who the students were. The professors knew. I think small schools are just so great for college in the care that they put into the kids. I always felt like I was just encouraged to do everything I could do. While I was there, I started the College Democrats. And the college
they didn't have one?
No, they didn't, because that was seen as too mainstream.
Interesting.
Yes, but interesting. Today they do have both college Democrats and college Republicans.
Sure.
But at the time that I went, it was really Swarthmore the students had been very anti-establishment. Anything.
Okay, sure.
Yes, any established,
any kind of party,
was not something that the students were interested in. I was interested in politics, and so I started the College Democrats, and I invited candidates to have debates at the college, and I loved it. I just thought it was all so very interesting.
Nice.
Yeah.
Was Harvard Law just the next natural progression?
I always wanted to go to Harvard Law, and in fact, I didn't even apply for Harvard undergrad because I had this very strange idea that if you went to Harvard undergrad, you weren't allowed to go to their law school. Like you had to switch. And it's completely bizarre. And I don't know where I got that idea, but it's why I didn't apply for the undergrad, because I wanted to go to the law school. Wow. And I had just read about, my parents had taken me to visit Harvard Law School when I was a kid. My dad's from Framingham, Massachusetts. And so we'd go back to visit his family. They took me to see it. And they've always been very strong about encouraging academics. It's like you could do anything wrong, but you had to keep your grades up. That was the number one thing we had to do. From a very young age, I was shown that this was something that I should strive for. Yep. I really never lost it. I just always wanted to go there. And as it turned out, I loved it. I got to work for Lawrence Tribe on Supreme Court briefs. I took a seminar with Supreme Court Justice Stephen Breyer while he was on the Supreme Court.
Wow.
I was in a 12-person seminar with him. This is crazy. I mean, I couldn't even believe that I was there.
What a great
it was just,
yeah,
it was just shocking. I took classes from Senator Elizabeth Warren before she was in the Senate.
Wow.
And now, of course, she's running for president.
Exactly.
It was just extraordinary opportunity to be exposed to people who are leaders in their field. And to realize that they're all people, that they're all approachable. I sort of had this idea that if I met someone like that, I might just combust, right? Like it might be a spontaneous combustion. Like it couldn't be real and I couldn't actually shake their hand or, just the world would explode because they're not real somehow. And so being in law school and getting to know people who I had before just admired as real people, helped me get over that, which I really needed to get over it in order to ever be able to run for office myself.
Sure.
I just, you need to be able to see it as something that real people do, or you can't do it yourself. So that was definitely the best thing that I took away from that experience. Also, I went there because I had a Luce Fellowship, which paid a big chunk of my law school education. I graduated with only $10,000 in debt. And I just hired an assistant district attorney who has over $300,000 in debt. I feel very, very fortunate. I am. My entire educational background and only $10,000 in debt. It's amazing.
Wow. You graduate Harvard.
Yeah.
What's next? Were you planning on coming back to Maine at some point? What brought you how did you get to Portland, Oregon?
I was always thinking that I wanted to come back to Maine. Yeah. But my husband had followed me to law school and he decided that he wanted to be a naturopathic doctor.
Yep.
And he got into a school in Portland, Oregon.
I hear there's a very good school out there.
Yes. And it's the oldest one in the country. Yep. And that's where he wanted to go. So that's how we ended up in Portland, Oregon for 4 years.
Fair enough.
Yeah. And I loved it.
I'll see your Harvard Law and I'll raise you. Yeah.
So, and I did really love it out there.
Oregon is beautiful. Yes.
Beautiful. The rain didn't bother me at all, having been used to snow. So it was a wonderful place to live. We had a great time out there. Our oldest child was born out there, Atticus.
Nice.
But Atticus being born and my parents coming to visit really showed us how much we needed their help. Raising children is...
Well, and it's not like you really knew anybody out there because you just moved there.
Well, my husband's parents were out in Portland, Oregon.
Oh, okay.
And they're wonderful people. They had very busy separate lives because they'd both been divorced and remarried. Right. And so they just didn't have the amount of time that we needed. Right. It's really what it came down to. And then I'd always wanted to go back to Maine.
Yeah.
How we really figured this out, though, is we spent a year in Singapore. I had did I say?
Yeah, that was my next question.
You know
how did you get to Asia?
I just realized I mixed up the names. So at Harvard Law School, I had a Truman Fellowship, which paid for Harvard Law School.
Okay.
But I went to Singapore on a Luce Fellowship.
Okay.
So I mixed up those names. I'm sorry about that. I got to Singapore because, again, going to a small school, people remember you. So the Dean of Fellowships and Prizes, Gil Stott, called me when I was in Portland, Oregon, and said, Maeghan, there's this fellowship that I think you should apply for. You have to be under age 30, and I think Swarthmore would want to nominate you for this. So I did apply. I applied when I was pregnant, and I didn't get it. And then I applied again the following year, and I did get it. And the interview that I had, the final round interview, was with the same person both years.
Oh, wow.
And
so did he remembered you?
And he did. And he said to me, because I was 9 months pregnant in my final round interview the first time. And so in the second year, when he interviewed me, he said to me, I seem to remember you were a lot fatter last year.
Oh,
Like, well,
okay.
Okay. I was
that's
9
one way
months
to remember.
pregnant. Yeah, I couldn't believe it.
Tact is not one of your strong suits.
So I did receive it the following year, which was really perfect timing, because instead of bringing a baby to Asia, which is what I originally thought I wanted,
Right.
I brought a 1.5-year-old to Asia. And what I realized is that when Atticus was a baby, he was really just happy as long as someone was holding him. And Christopher was able to bring him to classes with him.
Wow.
He actually set up this whole audio-visual thing so that other parents could also have their babies with them and see the class, but from another room, so the babies could make noise.
Nice.
So
Your husband's a techie, too.
Oh, yes. Yeah. So
Oh, yeah.
he's got...
I'm liking it more and more.
So Atticus was very, very happy as a baby to be with his dad or to be with me. But once he hit age 1, he really started to cling to me. It was very, very difficult to be working full time and to
Sure.
be away from him. I found it emotionally very, very difficult. So getting this fellowship was truly a dream come true. It enabled me to go to Singapore with Atticus and Christopher. And the job that I had was working with the Association of Women for Action and Research. I was allowed to work from our apartment because they didn't have a computer for me.
Wow.
So I brought my laptop so that I'd have a place to work. They didn't care what hours I worked.
Right.
They just cared that I got the projects done.
That's perfect.
And I actually got their first project done in November, and they said, oh, well, we thought this would take you a lot longer. We don't have anything else for you. We can try to come up. And I said, well, it's okay for me if you just want to think about it till January. So it gave us this lovely month in December,
That's great.
and then they got a new project for me in January. But it was so different from the work world that I was used to. So I got to spend the days with Atticus that he was feeling clingy. Yeah. I just said, okay, fine, we're going to the zoo. And then the days when he wanted to be with Dad, Christopher always brought him to the Science Museum. I always brought him to the zoo. We had our favorites. And so Christopher would take him to the Science Museum, and I would spend the whole day working. It gave us a real nice balance, a nice way to raise a family. And it showed me how important it is those early years to be able to be there for your kids. That made such a difference, difference for me.
And also you don't realize until you have kids that you really, I'm trying to think how to say this. I have such an appreciation for single parents.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know how single parents
I don't either.
make it work because, just being a team with your spouse.
Well, and we found that while being a team, we were able to care for Atticus very well, but we weren't able to care for each other.
That's a hard lesson
right?
to learn.
And so that's when my parents came to visit, and they just wrapped themselves around Atticus and brought him everywhere and wanted to spend every second with him.
Sure.
And Christopher and I were able to spend time alone and do things for ourselves and for each other. And that was the moment when we said, we're going back to Maine.
Yeah.
We need this. We need this ability to have grandparents care for our child so that we can also have a relationship. I don't know how people do it just with two parents.
Well, it's good that you recognize that too, because a lot of people don't recognize it when that happens. And then by the time they do, they're already starting to grow apart.
Right. Exactly.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Side note on Christopher, though.
Yeah.
How was Singapore for his homeopathic?
Oh, it was
must have been
fantastic. Oh, yeah, it was. Because on the days that I had Atticus, he did an internship with a naturopathic doctor in Singapore.
Nice.
And a homeopathic doctor in Kuala Lumpur, Malaysia.
Wow.
Because Singapore is close enough that he was able to do that.
Oh, wow.
So it was absolutely...
The rest of the world seems so much further ahead on the homeopathic and naturopathic than we are.
Yes.
So,
and well...
we're getting there, but it's taking a while.
We tend to... We like to have everything proven to us ahead of time.
Yes.
And what I found when I first learned about homeopathy and the fact that it has no side effects, because the worst thing that you can say about it is that there's nothing there. And that's what many people believe, is that there's just nothing there. So there's no side effects, but it doesn't do anything. But what I found is that simply trying it, that it worked on me, it worked on our kids, and I didn't have to worry about side effects.
Right.
And so when I had a very sick child who I thought, oh, we've got to rush to the hospital because they have croup and they're having trouble breathing.
Yeah.
For Christopher to be able to say, okay, I saw this with both of our children, gave Atticus the homeopathic, and same thing happened with Colin. While we're rushing out the door, by the time we got to the car, they were fine. And being able to then just go back into the house, and they're breathing fine now. And okay, let's just, one of us stayed up all night and we kept giving the remedy again every 2 hours and run the shower in the bathroom to keep the steam going. As much as I don't like staying up all night, it's a lot more pleasant than staying up all night in an emergency room.
Yeah.
So I've just seen it work. And I would never say, okay, I'm going to wait and not go to the emergency room and wait for this to work. We'd always do both.
Yeah.
We'd always be like, okay, we're giving the homeopathic and we're going there.
Yeah.
But then we didn't have to ever arrive because it would work before we got there. But I was still on the way because I didn't believe it, right? Because I'd say, oh, just in case, I want to make sure that I'm there. And I'm still that way. Still that way today.
We do have that in the back of our mind.
Yeah.
We're like, I don't know about this. But it's hard to argue with testimony.
And that's it. It's just worked for us. And it saved my children from a lot of intervention that I hear that other kids have to go through. And I'm just very grateful that Christopher is such a great homeopath and able to do this for them.
These are the rabbit trails I get. But I love it. So I'm going to transition out of work, move more into current life stuff. Who do you admire?
Who do I admire? Oh my gosh, so many people. It really is true. I have great admiration for Janet Mills. And I know that she is our governor now, but I have admired her really pretty much my entire life. Yeah. When I was a child, I remember my parents, especially my mom, talking about the new district attorney in Androscoggin. And this would be when I was in high school, and saying what a difference she was making in the prosecution of child sex crimes, because she actually cared about those cases and she would take on those cases herself. So I heard about this person before I ever met her. And then I learned when she became the first woman attorney general, and talk about resilience, right? She has had a number of things happen in her life where she's had to stay strong. And I so admire her for that. She ran for attorney general and lost twice before she ran and won. That's resilience. That's strength. And then after she was served for 2 years, she was out for 2 years and then back in as attorney general again, right? And just having that strength to do that, and then to run for governor. And I know how much she loved her husband and how much she loved her. Every time I met him at an event, he would always tell me that Janet was going to be the next governor, and because he was just so proud of her. I think it's just wonderful that she was able to have such a great relationship, and to care for those 5 children who had lost their mom and to become their mother and to have the career that she's had. Yeah, I think the world of her.
Yeah, how does that feel to be right down the street from her now?
Yeah, it feels wonderful. It really does. Yeah,
That's
it
nice.
really does.
What charity or philanthropic organization are you most passionate about?
Oh, it's hard to pick one. So I'm on a number of different boards right now. Those are the ones that I care the most about. So I'm on the Sexual Assault Crisis and Support Center board, and I'm the president of that board. I have seen how sexual assault impacts people, and particularly children, and it impacts them their entire life. I mean, I've talked with young girls who, while they're talking to me, grab paper clips and start cutting their arms because it's so emotionally traumatizing to relive what they went through. So to do everything that I can to bring public awareness to that issue is something that's very important to me. There was a time in our history, and we forget this, when it really wasn't seen as the crime that we see it today. Right. That people thought, oh, children forget that. Oh, kids are resilient. We don't have to worry about it. And they are resilient, but they keep those scars their entire life. Oh, yeah. So I'm a very big advocate in talking about sexual assault and bringing awareness to that subject. But I also just really love the work I do with the YMCA and Boys and Girls Club board in Waterville. Yep. Just helping kids have a safe place to go, and their backpack program where they give food to children.
Because not everyone can come to your mom's house anymore.
Right. No, exactly. Exactly. And there was a time when we used the food banks when we were living in Lewiston. So the food banks, just giving food to people who need food. I just see that as so, so important. Yeah. And then I'm also on the Family Violence Project board to bring awareness about domestic violence and about having positive relationship and not hurting each other, because half of all of our homicides in Maine are are domestic violence related.
Wow.
Yeah.
That I did not realize.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. And that's been true for a number of years now. So all of those things, it's not one. I can't pick one. I'm sorry.
You can't pick one. What brings you joy?
Definitely going for a hike with my family. I love being outside in the Maine woods, moving. I like to be physically active and just hanging out with my family. That's, although actually it's my birthday on Saturday. Oh. And so my husband asked me what I want to do. And I will say I picked, going for a run on Popham Beach. So
are you going to be able to do that with the 3 inches of snow we just got?
I hope it's not. I don't think we'll have snow at the beach. I know it's not going to be warm enough to go in the water, but we can run along the beach.
You can run along the beach.
And all three, because Atticus is in college now, so it's just the 3 of us at home. And Colin loves to run. I love to run. Christopher does. So we're going to all just go and run on the beach.
I run when chased. That's it. I think I already know the answer to this, but who inspires you?
Who inspires me?
I mean, you've already talked about Janet Mills, but is there anybody else that inspires you as well?
So, I mean, she definitely inspires me. So I knew for a long time that I wanted to run for district attorney. In fact, I worked for Senator Mitchell when I was in college over the summer. Oh. The person who is my direct supervisor, his name is Bob Carolla, and he became a recommender for me when I applied for things afterwards. Yep. So he recently sent me the letters of recommendation that he wrote, just so that I could kind of have this trip down memory lane. It was really very nice of him. It was just a couple weeks ago. And what was fascinating to me is that he wrote in the letter of recommendation that it was my goal to become a district attorney someday. So I thought, I was like, wow, so I really did
it comes full circle.
I thought I wanted that for a long time, and it turns out I really did. So inspiring me, and answering your direct question on who inspires me, Kamala Harris wrote a book called Smart on Crime.
Okay.
When she was the district attorney of San Francisco. And her book was instrumental both for how I structured my campaign and the message that I gave, because it was all about, let's be smart on crime. Let's put people who cause physical violence in prison, and with people who are committing crimes where we can rehabilitate them, let's rehabilitate them so they'll become a part of our community again and use our resources wisely, because prison is $42,000 a year. It's very, very expensive. And our veterans court, our drug courts, our co-occurring disorders court, they work so well at connecting people to our community again, and they're half the price of prison. And the recidivism rate is half. So we have less crime, we have less cost, better outcomes. So that's what I ran on. And I got that from reading her book.
Kamala Harris's book.
And now, of course, she's also running for president. Who
That's
isn't?
why I know
Who
the name.
isn't?
Right? This is like the 2010 gubernatorial Maine.
But I do want to announce today, I am not running for president.
Okay, thank you for clearing up that point. You know, it's funny. I was looking at the pictures out front of, there's a drawing of you.
Yes, that was done by one of our interns.
I took a picture of it. I think I'm going to post it up there along with this podcast. But there are other pictures up there, which I assume are from the drug court, the veterans court, or the drug courts that talk about rehabilitation. And
those are new pictures. They were taken by a graduate of our co-occurring disorders court, people who were willing to have their picture taken, because there's obviously no requirement, and have it displayed to show some of our success stories. We haven't really finished yet. We need to put some labels and explanation. But what he asked people to do is to write down something important to them on a piece of white paper. And so that's in the picture, what they wrote. Every single person has an inspiring story that we put their picture up. I just think it shows what we can accomplish, because the whole thing, all the pictures are taken by a graduate of our court, and they're of people who are great success stories.
That's great.
Yeah.
I love it. Music.
Oh, wow. I love music. I love musicals. From when I was a kid, I was in the Sound of Music for the Community Little Theater in Lewiston. So Sound of Music was my favorite for a very long time, because I was in it. I was in it when I was 9 years old at the time. Wow. So it was quite a formative time period for me. And I just loved all the music, and I would sing all of the songs.
How can you not?
But I also really love classical music, because both of my kids play instruments.
Classical instruments,
and so Atticus plays the violin, Colin plays the cello. And I've recently got very into fiddle, because Colin now loves especially Acadian fiddle music. And so he's actually the only cellist in the fiddle group that they have here in Central Maine. But he goes to fiddle camp every year. It's a wonderful camp. Bring your tent and sleep in a tent. And my husband always goes with him.
Yeah, my nieces and nephews go. And actually, my brother-in-law just went for the first time.
Yeah, it's great, right?
They love it.
They absolutely
love
it.
They're up late jamming at night, and they have lessons during the day.
Exactly.
They have a great time.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
Yeah. So I love listening to him play that music. It's so full of pep, and just makes you feel so alive.
Well, and we have such an incredibly talented musical people here in the state of Maine.
We really
especially
do.
when it comes to fiddles and stuff like that.
We really do. I mean, we have people from all over the world who come to this fiddle camp.
Yeah.
And it's an hour from our house. We can just drive there. It's amazing.
That's great. So I'm going to transition into philosophical, and then we'll start to wrap up a little bit.
Sure.
What are the most important lessons you've learned in life?
Resilience is definitely the big one.
I see that as a common theme.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, life is not easy. And I always say that to the people in our drug court as well, is if you are looking for things to just all fall into place and it's just never going to happen. It's always going to be difficult. And what you have to do is find things that you can hold on to that we call pro-social activities. So things that bring you joy without causing you harm and without causing harm to the community. So it's just so important to learn how to do that, because there's tough things that happen in everyone's life, and you just have to be able to keep going. So yes, that would be the biggest thing, is resilience.
Okay. What are the most important lessons you've learned from your relationships?
Oh, to forgive. You have to be able to forgive people, whether that is the person you're married to.
She's not saying anything, Christopher.
No, actually, he is very good at forgiving. and actually taught me a lot about forgiveness, because whenever we argue, he's over it so quickly. And it's just, I've learned a lot from seeing his ability to do that. But also just professionally, I have often had people where the relationship has started as a contentious one, become my really good friends. And it almost makes the whole friendship that much more special. The fact that it started off so negatively. Like, there's actually one, and I won't say who it is because I don't want to embarrass him, but I heard that this person was talking about me to other people and saying some very negative things. And so instead of sort of reacting and saying negative things back, I just called him up and said, hey, could I sit down and could we just talk? That turned into a really strong, tremendous relationship for both of us, where we've done some very good things in our community. And it was just great to hear what the issue was and to be able to address it and then to work together to make our community better. So I always find that whenever I know that somebody is really upset with me, that there's so much good that comes from just addressing it and just, let's get over this. We don't need to keep this hanging out there.
Would you mind teaching the rest of our politicians how to do that? Seems like they're all forgetting how to do that these days.
It does make me very sad.
And it's both sides. It's all parties.
It is. It absolutely is. It's both sides. It's people who aren't on sides. We're very judgmental. There's a passage in the Bible about you go after the speck without taking the log out of your own eye. Yeah. I feel like we're so quick to criticize, so quick to judge each other. And I just wish that we wouldn't do that.
What are you proudest of in your life?
Right, proudest of? Oh, my kids. It's just, really, anytime I think about them or talk about them, it just makes me smile. I never expected that, this person could come into my life who I knew nothing about and could grow up in my family and just become, it's just like a miracle every day, watching them change and watching them grow. That might not be what you were looking for.
No, that's great. Everybody's got a different answer, but most of the time it's their kids.
Yeah.
What do you hope people will say about you at your funeral?
I hope they will say that I was a great mom and a great wife, and that I really cared about my community. And I did my best to try to make my community a wonderful place for everyone who lives here.
And if this was to be our very last conversation, what words of wisdom would you want to pass along?
To recognize that letting your light shine is a good thing to do. Don't hide your light under a bushel. Let it shine. We all have things we need to share with the world and that we need to share with the community. And we're all here for a reason, every single one of us. So to never feel like you're done, like you can't go on. I've known people who started their time incarceration at the age of 13 and then at the age of 27, turn it around and become really important giving people in our community. It's never too late to let your light shine and to become someone who can help all of us grow.
That's all the questions I have. So now I have my rapid fire.
Uh-oh.
What is your favorite word? You're a lawyer. You've got to have a favorite word.
Oh, wow. Miracle.
What is your least favorite word?
Defeat. Depression.
What sound do you love?
The sound of the cello.
So Colin, if you're listening, what sound do you hate?
I hate the sound of cars crashing. I hear that on our vehicle manslaughter cases. And that sound always just makes me cringe. Yeah.
What is your favorite curse word?
My favorite curse word?
I bleep them out.
I'm really not very good at swearing.
I'm sure you're very good about not swearing.
Yeah. I actually get made fun of for the fact that I don't tend to swear.
What profession other than yours would you like to attempt?
Well, it depends on what you consider my profession to be. Well, sometimes I think I might want to try to be a judge. And that's actually one of the things that I kind of battle with because I love interacting with people one-on-one so much that I worry that being a judge would be too isolating for me. But I think about trying it sometimes because I do love the law and I have such respect for our third branch of government and I love reading. And so I love reading about the law.
I wasn't even going to ask the question on, do you enjoy reading it?
Yeah, I do.
I knew it was
so.
going to be a yes.
Yes,
so, yeah.
yes, very much so.
What profession would you not like to do?
Trash collector?
Very needed.
Very needed. That seems like a tough one. I actually worked at Country Kitchen bread packing factory when I was in high school. And I found that just that motion of having to turn and pack the rolls for 8 hours a day was so physically exhausting that I think if I had to pick up heavy bags of trash and turn, I mean, I was just doing rolls, which are relatively light, and it was really hard.
Wow. Okay. And finally, if heaven exists, what would you like to hear God say when you show up?
Welcome.
That's it. That's all the questions that I have. Maeghan, thank you very much.
This was a lot of fun.
This was a lot of fun. I
Thank
appreciate you
you
taking the time out to go ahead and do this.
This is such a great diversion.
Thank you so much. We don't have sponsors. We promote local charities. This week's episode features the Sexual Assault Crisis and Support Center, located in Winthrop, Maine. The statistics of sexual assault are staggering. The mission of the Sexual Assault Crisis and Support Center is to lessen the trauma-related suffering caused by sexual assault. Their annual celebrity dinner raises thousands of dollars for the support center. Last year, they raised over $60,000. To find out more, to donate, or to volunteer, please visit www.silentnomore.org. That's www.silentnomore.org.
Welcome home to me.
This podcast was created and edited by Scott Malevsky. Thanks to our guest this week, and a special thanks to Ellis Paul for the use of his song, Welcome Home to Maine. You can find his CDs, music, and touring schedule at ellispaul.com. You can find us on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, Stitcher, Spotify, TuneIn, Google Play, and iTunes. For more content and bios, visit www.interviewswithme.com. Thanks for listening, and we hope you join us next time.